Imagine after a long day of work, a crazy week, you sit down to play a game of Commander. You pull out one of your Commander decks that you're a big fan of. It has a cool typo theme. You're a big fan of Lord of the Rings, which works with the theme of it, and you're just excited to jam. But then all of a sudden, the randoms at the LGS that you so happen to get paired up against tell you that your deck is boring. It's not creative at all. With the hundreds of thousands of Commanders that feel like are available at this point, you did not pick the right ones or the ones that match up to their creative standards. And that seems to be a problem that a lot of people talk about happen at random tables. And I think it's an underlying sentiment that the vast majority of the Commander community don't necessarily feel. I think there's enough cards in the Magic universe that you sit across your average game and you don't know what you're playing against. Now, I wanted to discuss that in today's video. Go over a Reddit post talking about elitism in this game and how we can break down why it matters to combat this, but also why creativity is kind of on a fine line at this point. How Commander deck building is kind of on a precipice. Most entitled players I've ever met at an LGS table. Hey everyone, just a short rant incoming. This weekend I had for the first time ever a situation where I left the table before the game even started. I was unpacking my Eowyn Shield Maiden deck, and I think this is really important just because it's a relatively simple commander. The turn you play Eowyn, or if any other human entered this turn while Eowyn was out at the beginning of combat, you create a 2/2 red human knight creature token with haste. You create 2 of them actually. Then if you have 6 or more humans, you draw a card. What's great is this is all at the beginning of combat. So again, the turn you cast Eowyn, you go to combat, you can then create a bunch of 2/2s as long as it's pre-combat on your first main, and then you can potentially draw some cards as well. You get 3 humans. If you have 3 other humans, I mean Eowyn costs 5, you potentially have other humans as well. You can then draw a card, go about into combat, and start swinging it immediately. This doesn't necessarily provide any buffs to the rest of your board, but you are creating a bunch of tokens, you're getting in an aggressive, and it's colors that kind of lend to that. So the idea of the deck is relatively simple, and you can kind of imagine how this builds itself. From there, the woman at the table yawned and said to her partner, "Wow, he really wants to bore us with the human tribal deck," he replied. "Some people really need to be more creative with their deck." Then they revealed their own decks. He said, "Let's play our Dungeons and Dragon decks." Oh Lord, even more WotC elitist here. And pulled out Miriam's Sentinel Worm. Underground no-name commander Miriam Sentinel Worm. She brought out Strahd von Zerovic, which turned out to be an alt art proxy for Edgar Markov. Folks, Miriam Sentinel Worm. Does this look familiar? Because this is one of the most powerful dragon commanders out there. Whenever another non-token dragon you control enters, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's non-legendary. Thing has Ward 2 for 6 mana as a 6/6, no haste or anything like that. But again, the second most powerful, or the most popular, I should say, most popular, maybe powerful is the bad word for it, but popular commander, rightfully so, in the whole dragon subtheme according to EDH rec statistics. Underground really evokes creativity when people play their Miriam deck, right? And then the other person, Edgar Markov, one of the most fair and balanced commanders on the planet, by the way. No one has ever had a problem with this, and it's almost like Wizards is printing the eminence mechanic all the time because people love this deck. It is not powerful at all. Free value has never been a problem in the commander format or any other part of Magic the Gathering. And the fact that you don't even need to cast this card from your command zone to get any type of value out of it is actually helpful to beginners. Pro players or more skilled players would never want to play something like this, right? Right? Not at all. I mean, just for a little bit of context in the background, Strahd von Zerovic was a vampire, Dark Lord of the Valley, Barovia, one of the domains of the dead or dread, located in the remote corners of Shadowfell. I'm not super well versed in D&D, but I just wanted to kind of provide that context. Pretty sweet alt art. Honestly, I would like to kind of see what that proxy was looking like. Regardless though, at that point, I didn't even care what the 4th player was playing. Shout out to the 4th player, just being the observer in the party here. I just asked, seriously? You're complaining about creativity with those commanders? He said, "Sorry, we're just big D&D fans. My bad. Hold on. We've been playing TTRPGs for years. When I mentioned I might just be a Lord of the Rings fan, he replied, yeah, who isn't? Damn. Right? Who is it? I mean, based, but also, come on. Honestly, I'm glad I didn't play with them. I'm assuming they walked away at this point. It's wild how narrow-minded and lacking in empathy people can be. At first, I really thought they were just messing with me, but nope, they were serious. Have you ever met such entitled players? Did you leave a table, or have you left a table before the game even started? And what was the situation? And honestly, the posts down below are absolutely hilarious, and plenty of ones get highlighted and everything. But what I want to do is take this story and talk about the idea of elitism in creativity, and then just creativity in general when it comes to commander decks. It's an ongoing discussion that I think not enough people are having. There's a lot of homogenization of concepts in the format, even though there is still creativity being pushed. There's so many options available to us set after set, more legendaries and everything. And we're always talking about how this can go into this. Oh, this is a new commander. Oh, I'm replacing this. This is a great card in the 99, whatever. There's all these conversations to have. But the way we consume commander content en masse on the internet, at least through YouTubers and maybe on our favorite Twitter pages and on EDH Rec, leads to a lot of data-driven homogenization, which can reduce creativity in many ways that can lead to maybe thought patterns like this. And also the elitism involved in here might just be based on people that are very enfranchised. And so you get into conversations around elitism and creativity, net decking, all that stuff, people that are more enfranchised versus less, buying a pre-con versus not. All of this is kind of wrapped into this discussion, and I wanted to kind of give my thoughts on it. Firstly, we're going to talk about gatekeeping, right? Yes, this is the image I chose for gatekeeping, by the way. Shout out to everyone that understands what this is referencing. But when it comes to holding people back from playing the game, one of the worst things that you can do is make someone feel bad for something that isn't their fault whatsoever, right? And this is solely in the deck building process, right? We, at this point in the game where the Aowen deck is revealed, don't even know, we do not know whether or not this deck is human typal whatsoever. We don't know if it's some type of swords, like, you know, like some Voltron commander. I don't know, like it could be Infect for all we know. We don't know what type of deck this is. What happens with this is that we already have a presumption in our mind, and then we go into it and our assumptions are already potentially being met, and we feel like it is a correct thing for us to feel this way because we are now correcting something that we've assumed, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if it's not, it can lead to negative play patterns where if you are already thinking bad on people, what are the chances that the deck actually turns out to be something different and you change your mind for the better, that you are willfully surprised? The pattern of behavior doesn't really lead that way. So not only is the gatekeeping a problem for your opponent that we can already understand, getting less people to be a part of the gathering or feel welcomed in the gathering is already a problem, but the negative behavior pattern here, the thoughts, do not lead to you being a better commander player. It doesn't lead you to be open. It doesn't lead you to be ready. It may lead you to make assumptions in your gameplay. You might choose to hold up removal for something that likely will not even happen, likely does not exist. And in many ways, because of the amount of options that a lot of commander players have with, again, set to set, legendary to legendary, every single commander you have to assume is going to be built in a net new way. So many different personalities, so many different ways that people engage with the game, and so many different ways that people combo and feel about certain things. You might feel like, you know, Bolas' Citadel might go in a certain type of deck, but this player might have a argument for it, but then the next player might have an argument against it. Why? They've built their deck in a certain way to specifically not actually have Bolas' Citadel as maybe a sort of synergy. Now, some people might do that maybe from a price perspective or whatever, but they can do it from a synergy perspective. Making these assumptions don't help anybody. And you can ask these questions in a different way. I think one thing that people lack is the ability to communicate, right? And this is something that people can improve on lifelong. It's something that you don't just get off the rip. You have to have a lot of positive and negative interactions with people to understand what is appropriate to say and what not. But to be curious, you don't just say things like, you know, that's a weird way to build that deck. You don't just make a statement. You can ask, what brought you to build a deck that way? That's interesting. Why did you decide to build it around that theme? And strike up a conversation and invoke someone's passion and creativity. Have them have that conversation, right? Because ultimately, as I alluded to, This is Magic the Gathering. You are part of the gathering. You are in a 4-player pod, arguably one of the most social aspects of the game in general. And that's kind of a separate video that I want to tack on potentially even later this week. The social aspects of Commander versus 1v1 constructed. But this is one of the most social parts of the game. You are in a 4-player pod with 3 other people you have to interact with. And I myself at least try and make sure in those games that, you know, I may not be the one talking and interrupting all the time, but I want to have an open conversation. I want to be able to make those jokes and make those small little things. You know, when someone casts a turn 2 Soul Ring, I'll say, oh, storm count 1. You know, I just try and lighten the mood with statements like that, because obviously that's not going to happen. People are going to laugh and all that stuff, because I want to create a welcoming environment. Because at the end of the day, when people feel nervous and they go about their certain things, it also helps lighten the mood when it comes to that level of creativity where people are maybe going off with a tried and true line, a Doss's Oracle and everything, but you've created a light mood where, you know, people aren't feeling as bad about it. They just are excited to play the game and keep going. Let's run it back. Let's keep it going. Mood switches like this are important, and attacking someone's creativity off the rip without even the game starting is so problematic. And then also doubling down on it with someone else creates this environment where you curate the prod. You have the majority opinion there because the other person is a stranger, the 4th player is a stranger. You have majority control here, and it's really hard to stop stuff like this, because even if I was to, you know, push back as a player potentially in that pod, that 4th player, it just creates a negative, sour environment. Because if someone is willing to make statements like this, and then you push back, you ask that question just like OP did, and they even respond back, they are probably doubling down on that. They are not questioning the statement that they made and how they feel about it. And so therein lies the problem. It's very hard to attack these dynamics and everything when it comes to certain norms that happen, right? Like, because of some of the things that already exist in the kind of spaces of Magic the Gathering, it's very hard when like the random 0.0000001% of situations where, you know, I believe, for example, in this situation, there was a girl involved, and the vast majority of time that I've come across a girl playing Magic the Gathering, it's been a fantastic experience. They are perfectly great. They're knowledgeable about the game. They know exactly what they're doing. That's fantastic. They are not different from a guy playing the game or whatever, right? But when it comes to this situation, it might be perceived as potentially different, where if you say something against that, maybe there's a power dynamic happening where someone feels like you're attacking the girl, someone who is a minority in the space, but you're simply trying to address the situation of someone being negative as a 0.0000001%, where they are the one girl in the situation that would act this way. And every other girl would act normally, just like how, in my experience, the majority of other people would act normally as well. The dynamics in play can be very problematic as well, which can lead to different people not wanting to respond. Potentially why maybe that 4th player didn't even get involved whatsoever, and, you know, OP just left before anything happened. Regardless, all of that is to say, gatekeeping is a major problem, especially when it's around creativity and it's not even around behavior. You are making assumptions about someone based on the deck that they're playing, and you're already stopping the game where it even started at the Rule 0 conversation. The next piece I want to touch on is creativity. So deck creativity is really interesting because with the options that we have, there are traditional ways to build out a deck. Maybe you have a commander that gives a certain creature type +1/+1. That can be seen as some type of commander. You're going to put a bunch of creatures of that type, maybe some shapeshifters in there with cool abilities, all that stuff. It all counts. You build that deck that way. But then potentially the second line of text then says, hey, you know, whenever you cast a creature of a certain type, untap an artifact specifically. And then you're thinking, hey, maybe there's a way where I can build this as like a control deck where I play these cards that create tokens of that creature type. That way, when those creatures enter, I can untap the artifact token generators, or I can untap my mana rocks and everything. And then I can maybe go off in some type of combo, or I can use that to untap like tapped removal spells, like, you know, tap this destroy target creature, and then I play a creature and then I untap that and everything. Like, maybe there are ways where I can take advantage of that. And so all these different lines of text can be really interesting as to how you take advantage of it. Like me personally, one of the decks that I built, and I don't have any more as of the advent of the bracket system because the concept just, I don't think really works here. But it was a Reaper King, like typal deck, right? And it was like more like, it was like 5-color changelings, and it was more creative back then. I think it's like more common now, especially, but back then, you know, maybe like 10 years ago or something when I was building this, it was a lot more creative because yes, I'm going to build some type of like low power deck with a bunch of basics and all that stuff, but I'm going to have all these payoffs where like, if you have this many demons, you win the game. Or if you tap like 7 elves, then, you know, you gain control of opponent's lands. And then I'm just going to play a bunch of changelings. I'm going to play 5-color changelings, and I'm just going to go about it that way. I thought it was really cool because then it said, the commander said, whenever a scarecrow entered the battlefield, you destroyed a permanent. And then I would just go about a land destruction theme. But you can't really do that now with the bracket system. I can't really be playing land destruction. So I can change the way I play the deck, but then it's not really what I wanted to do with it. So I'm not going to do that now. But that's an example of creativity where you might play some type of like go wide strategy. You might play a bunch of scarecrows at once, but I may not actually be looking to use the commander specifically. I might just be using it as a helm to play a bunch of like night typal elves, all that stuff. Like I can play all these random typal payoffs, but then use that as a way to play a bunch of shapeshifters and randomly synergize with my commander. Now, again, not the most creative thing in the world. I'm not going to give myself 10 out of 10 and some brownie points, but an example of where you can take certain levels of creativity. Let me know in the comment section down below, by the way, what is the most creative deck that you've come across in the game of Commander? Because I find a lot of people that make these type of creative decks aren't actually the ones that are listening to the quote unquote hard and fast rules. The Trinket Mages, 3/3 elves, and the Salubrious Snails, the content that they make is fantastic, by the way. It's great. It's often experience based through a high number sample size or kind of data driven. It is well informed content, but it also funnels you into a certain type of deck building, the optimization approach, where you want to do a certain amount of things, play a certain amount of lands, play a certain amount of this and that. And that was already happening to a certain degree when it came to the command zone. They were playing with and pushing commander deck templates. You should be playing this many board wipes, this much removal. And they've always talked about how that's a general theme. You should be able to make your changes from there. But with the advent of the popularity of Commander, a lot more people were able to play and sample the kind of efficacy of this approach, playing this many board wipes, playing this much removal, playing this many lands, all that type of stuff. And in more recent years, the big optimization push has been playing more lands on average, which I think has been a net positive for me when I've added more of that, but again, has been part of that optimization. It's approaching a uniform type of deck building that a lot of these creative types don't really necessarily follow. They have that as an outline, but with the amount of commander games that they play and how they know their LGS goes about things, their local group goes about things, they can get away with certain things. They may, you know, their group might play a little bit less removal, so you can get away with more greedy creature plays, or they might play a lot of counter magic, and so you have to play more, you know, uncounterable stuff and a lot of bad stuff that might be, you know, more easy to make uncounterable or sneak in or whatever it is. But creativity at some point has reached this point of like near optimization, and creativity in a broad sense, making really interesting brews, is kind of seen as more like an underground thing now. Whereas deck building and brewing in the 1v1 era was such an important part. It was never just about net decking, right? Because ultimately, if you wanted to be the best player, you tested and played the best deck. But without the kind of advent of Magic Online as a wide level of popularity, with Magic Arena and the amount of tournaments that we play, the amount of games we play on average of Magic now versus maybe back in like, I don't know, 2010, there was always a way to get a creative deck maybe on the Pro Tour at a high level tournament, and all of a sudden it's showing up all over your FNMs. There was a way to sneak in some type of brew because testing and deck heuristics was at a whole nother level. And I think in many ways we need to bring this concept back. It's not just about playing an optimal amount of mana, playing an optimal amount of ramp and doing this. Not all decks need to just be, you know, 10 mana rocks, 40 lands, and then at that point you're playing like 50 spells where, you know, 10 of them are at this mana curve, 10 of them are at this mana curve, you play this many counter spells. We don't need to be doing all that. We can hyper focus on a plan, maybe based on a commander, or make it a little bit more broad, or take a commander and really switch things up, right? Like play, you know, my slight variation was Obeka extra upkeeps, but then I built that super into just being the initiative, where a lot of people, when they see the Obeka, they might want to remove the Obeka once it gets out, once it hits once. But honestly, once it hits once, like, I don't really need to do much more. I just can go about the initiative from there, because I just need to get to the last mode of the initiative. And then at that point, I can usually get the ball rolling on drawing more cards, finding more initiative creatures, and just kind of chaining that more and more into more initiatives and more dungeons completed and more value. And so I can really, again, just go about the rest of the game without even going about with Obeka once. But of course, you still play the Arena of Glories and all that stuff for getting out Obeka later down the line. Regardless, though, we, I think, need to bring back creativity to the forefront. How do we identify creative ways to build commanders? I think that should be the type of content that I would challenge a lot of commander deck building content creators and brewers to push out there, because there are a lot of low subscriber count, low viewed creators out there that do a lot of deck tech videos out there. I see them, they get recommended to me every so often, but they don't get pushed. So I challenge you, maybe as the viewer, to also watch those videos and push them, comment, like, talk about with those creators ways that they can push different builds, push their passions, push their creativities, because it's not just the optimization curves that everyone's kind of curious about. Because if that's the type of content that's doing well and how to build the optimal version of this type of deck, then honestly, the children yearn for the mines, and the children are Magic players, and the mines are competitive Magic. The EDH players yearn for some type of 1v1 format, Canlander, or just go play some freaking Modern. And, Commander players, at the end of the day, yearn for a sense of community. They will want to play Magic unrestricted. They want the cards to be affordable. They want people to exist in the gathering, and they want to have open and honest conversation with each other. And Commander is just the best vehicle to do that. Unfortunately, with the way that we've been pushing content and kind of absorbing it, it just feels that the creativity is going down. But maybe I'm off basis on that. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Do you feel like the entitlement and the elitist mentality has risen in the Commander community? And does that have something to do with the creative angle in Commander? Has creativity kind of gone down the drain? The viewership on creative content and cool brewing and deck techs kind of gone down? And have people kind of risen to the challenge of optimization and hyper optimization to the point where that is the optimal way to build any Commander deck or play any game of Commander? And that is where we start to get this elitism of, wow, so creative, human typal, but I'm gonna play dragons and all that type of stuff. There's a lot of irony to be had in this specific Reddit post, but I thought the discussion was at least worth having from a holistic top-down type of view. So let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I don't know if I have a central thesis really for this video. I just thought the discussion was interesting.